In a world where alliances crumble, loyalty dissolves, and power favors the prepared rather than the protected, most people fail because they fear standing alone. This video confronts a single, brutal question: how do you win when you have no allies, no backing, and no margin for mercy? Picture a man walking through a silent battlefield, not of swords, but of intentions. Every smile conceals calculation. Every hand extended hides a dagger behind the back. In such a world, to depend on others is to gamble with your own survival. I will guide you through the architecture of solitary power. The art of advancing when no one shields your flank, the mindset required to wield strategy without sentiment, and the psychological truth that the lone individual, properly sharpened, can outmaneuver entire factions blinded by comfort and collective delusion. This is not a tale of heroism. It is a study of advantage carved from isolation, wrung from the discipline of seeing the world as it truly is: cold, competitive, and governed not by fairness, but by the few who are willing to see clearly and act decisively. When you walk alone, you begin to see the world without the fog that blinds those who cling to companions. Most people move through life chained to the comfort of allies, believing that safety lies in numbers. Yet history teaches a colder truth. The individual who stands without attachments often sees more clearly than entire councils crowded with advisors who seek to protect themselves rather than the ruler they supposedly serve. Consider the fate of many princes who surrounded themselves with loyalists, only to fall because their allies diluted their resolve. A ruler encircled by too many voices becomes deaf to reality. You, however, standing alone, are spared this burden. Your mind is not divided. Your will is not softened. Your direction is not contested by those who pretend to support you while quietly advancing their own interests. Tell me, is it not easier to act decisively when you need not pause to consult those who fear risks more than defeat? Independence sharpens the instincts, strips away illusions. You begin to see the true motives of others, not through the lens of hope, but through the discipline of suspicion. And suspicion, for the solitary strategist, is not paranoia, it is armor. Think of the generals of ancient Rome who operated far from their senate. Many achieved victories precisely because they were unburdened by the politics of their peers. They did not wait for approval. They did not seek reassurance. They acted. And action, in any contest where power is at stake, is often the dividing line between triumph and annihilation. But let us move from battlefields to something more personal. Have you ever noticed how groups slow themselves through the need for harmony? Watch a committee make a decision. It crawls. No one wants to offend. Everyone wants to be seen as agreeable. Consensus becomes a cage. Yet the lone individual can shift direction in an instant, adjusting tactics like a blade gliding toward an exposed weakness. While groups debate, you strike. The greatest paradox is this: people fear solitude because they believe it weakens them. Yet it is solitude that frees them from the chains that quietly erode strength. The moment you depend on others, you inherit their limitations. Their doubts infiltrate your resolve. Their emotions contaminate your judgment. And gradually, you become a reflection of their weaknesses rather than the architect of your own potential. Imagine two players at a table. One plays with a team behind him, whispering suggestions, urging caution, debating every move. The other plays alone, silent and focused. Which one sees the board with greater clarity? Which one acts without hesitation? Which one is unpredictable, uncontrolled, uncompromised? You already know the answer. The lone player becomes the one the others fear, because his strategy is not diluted by the insecurities of a crowd. There is also a psychological weapon in this independence. When others notice you do not bend toward alliances, they project onto you a strength you may not even claim. Human beings trust groups, but they respect individuals who refuse to seek protection. And respect, when mixed with uncertainty, becomes a potent force. It creates an aura, an unsettling sense that you see something they do not. Your silence becomes influence. Your distance becomes dominance. Look at modern power structures. The most lethal operators in politics, business, And social arenas are those who can act without needing reinforcement. They gather allies when useful, but never rely on them. They accept support, but remain self-sufficient. They walk away when an alliance becomes a burden. And because they are willing to stand alone, others gather around them instinctively, drawn like moths to a flame that neither flickers nor begs for company. The independence paradox is simply this: the fewer people you depend on, the more control you gain over those around you. When you no longer require them, they become the ones who seek your approval, your guidance, your presence. And power, at its core, belongs to the one who can walk away, not the one who must stay. But independence is only the beginning. Because once you have freed yourself from reliance, you must learn how to guide others while appearing detached, how to influence without being entangled, how to command without being claimed. And that, my perceptive viewer, leads us directly into the next principle, the art of cold objectivity, where emotion dies, strategy sharpens, and true power begins to take form. Cold objectivity is the discipline that frees you from the tyranny of your own emotions. When you learn to see events without sentiment, you step into a vantage point where others cannot reach. Most people drown in their feelings, reacting rather than calculating. But you, if you choose, can stand above the chaos and observe the world as a strategist rather than a victim. Ask yourself, how many decisions have you made out of fear, anger, or wounded pride? And how many of those decisions served you? In every era, the rulers who endured were those who could separate desire from necessity. Consider the ancient commanders who faced betrayal not with outrage, but with analysis. A weak ruler screams, a strong one studies. Imagine a general discovering that a trusted officer has turned against him. The common response would be emotional fury, but the objective mind asks a colder question: how can this betrayal be used? Emotion collapses opportunities, objectivity reveals them. You have witnessed this in your own life. Someone offends you, and instinct urges you to retaliate. Yet retaliation often exposes your intentions and reduces your control. A colder mind waits, observes, collects information. You learn who supports your enemy, who benefits from the conflict, who hesitates. In time, you will see the perfect moment to act, or the wisdom in not acting at all. This is the essence of psychological dominance, the ability to decide by calculation rather than impulse. Look at modern manipulators. The most effective ones evoke emotion in others while feeling little themselves. They speak softly to calm you, or raise their voice to rattle you, all while maintaining internal stillness. When you remain objective, you become immune to such tactics. Their provocations lose power. Their pressure dissolves. They reveal themselves without realizing it. And you, untouched, observe with clarity. History offers 100 examples. The shrewdest leaders read people like texts, studying their fears, ambitions, and contradictions. They understood that emotion is predictable. Predictability is exploitable. Consider the advisor who flatters his prince. The prince, driven by vanity, believes every soft word, but the objective ruler hears the flattery, notes its purpose, and files it into his mental archives. He is not moved, he is informed. In your own world, cold objectivity gives you similar vision. When someone praises you excessively, you evaluate their motive. When someone displays anger, you measure the intensity as data, not a threat. You begin to categorize human behavior not as personal attacks or gifts, but as indicators of deeper forces. This psychological distance allows you to act not for comfort, but for advantage. You may wonder, does this make you heartless? Not necessarily. It makes you prepared. Emotion has its place, but it should never command you. Let others be ruled by impulse. Let them cast themselves into conflict without thought. You will stand apart, quiet, patient, calculating. And because you are not governed by the storms that control them, you become the calm center around which their chaos swirls. Picture yourself in a negotiation. The other party grows frustrated, raising their voice, trying to intimidate you. Most people would mirror that energy, escalating until both sides lose clarity. But you sit still, your breathing slow, your expression unreadable. Their emotion becomes their weakness. Your stillness becomes your strength. Soon they reveal more than they intended, exposing their limits. In their desperation to provoke you, they hand you the keys to controlling the outcome. Cold objectivity is not merely a skill, it is a weapon. It cuts through illusions. It protects you from manipulation. It grants you control when others surrender theirs. And over time, it becomes a psychological armor thicker than any lie or threat. But objectivity alone is not enough. Because once you master emotional stillness, you must master the next step, using your unpredictability as a blade that keeps every rival unsure, unbalanced, and unable to anticipate your moves. And that is where our next keynote begins. In that realm, you will learn how to distort expectations, bend perceptions, and turn uncertainty into a silent threat that shadows every opponent who dares to measure your intentions without understanding the darkness that shapes them. Unpredictability is the refuge of those who refuse to be measured. When others cannot read you, they cannot restrain you, and this ignorance becomes your hidden fortress. Most people broadcast their intentions with reckless openness, revealing their fears, desires, and loyalties long before they act. But you, if you cultivate the discipline of strategic obscurity, become a figure they cannot anticipate. Consider how generals throughout history concealed troop movements not for deception alone, but to erode the enemy's confidence. When a rival doubts his own predictions, he loses twice, once to confusion and once to hesitation. Think of the lone operator who never states his intentions plainly. He listens, observes, and files away every detail, yet reveals little of his reasoning. Others attempt to guess his next move, but every guess contradicts the last. Their uncertainty corrodes their confidence, creating a psychological deficit he exploits without ever lifting a weapon. You have seen this dynamic in negotiations, arguments, and rivalries. The person who stays unreadable destabilizes the emotional foundation of everyone around him. They cannot anticipate him, so they prepare for every possibility, and in doing so, exhaust themselves long before the true conflict begins. Unpredictability is not chaos. It is controlled ambiguity. To wield it effectively, you must know precisely what others expect from you, and then choose whether to fulfill or violate that expectation. Imagine a courtier who behaves gently for months, earning trust, lowering defenses, and then, at the decisive moment, acts with ruthless precision. His unpredictability lies not in randomness, but in timing. He strikes when others believe he is incapable of striking. This calculated divergence between appearance and action is the essence of strategic misdirection, a weapon far sharper than rage or force, because it penetrates the mind before the body. Ask yourself, how often do you reveal your plans too soon? How often do you correct others when they misunderstand you, instead of letting the misunderstanding serve your interests? The unpredictable strategist does not clarify. He allows others to misread him, because every misinterpretation is a thread he can pull later. When opponents build their assumptions on false premises, you inherit an advantage that requires no effort. Their predictions collapse under their own weight. Meanwhile, you remain free, unchained by expectation, and able to move in directions they never prepared for. It is not deceit. It is the discipline of selective silence. Observe how uncertainty weakens the strongest adversaries. When they cannot understand you, they begin inventing explanations. These inventions soon become fears, and fears become constraints. Your unpredictability makes them cautious, hesitant, even paranoid. They second-guess every step, worried that any move might trigger your countermove. In this way, you win before the battle even begins. The greatest commanders in history mastered this psychological warfare. They did not merely attack armies. They attacked the expectations that held those armies together. When your enemy doubts his own understanding, he loses the will to resist with conviction, and conviction is the root of all effective action. But unpredictability must be shaped, not improvised. If you act without structure, you become chaotic rather than strategic, and chaos favors no one for long. The key is to maintain consistency in your principles while varying your expressions of them. You remain steady internally while appearing fluid externally. This duality creates an aura that unsettles allies and enemies alike. They see your calm nature and assume predictability, yet your actions defy their expectations at crucial moments. This tension keeps them off balance. It prevents them from mapping your behavior, and without a map, even the boldest leaders hesitate to move forward. Now consider what happens when unpredictability becomes your signature. People begin to treat you with caution, even reverence, because they fear the consequences of misreading you. This fear grants you influence without effort. You can enter a room silently, and yet your presence alters every conversation. Rivals watch your expressions, hoping to decipher meaning where none is given. Allies consult you carefully, unsure which version of you they will encounter. And through this carefully shaped uncertainty, you command a power that does not need to speak. But unpredictability is only the blade, next comes the hand that guides. In every struggle for influence, the contest is rarely fought in open fields. It unfolds in whispers, in small exchanges, and in the movements of groups who believe they act independently while unknowingly serving the designs of a solitary mind. When you wage a silent war for influence, you do not confront factions directly, you steer them, exploit their frictions, and weaponize their existing tensions. Ask yourself, why break a wall with fists when you can make those inside dismantle it for you? Throughout history, rulers who stood alone learned to turn groups against each other with precision. Consider the Italian city-states, where alliances shifted like shadows on stone. A clever ruler did not challenge a united faction. He divided it by feeding ambition to one side and fear to the other. He whispered promises, withdrew them, and watched as rivals clashed over illusions he created. You can replicate this strategy in your own world. Groups are always vulnerable to internal fractures because every collection of people hides hierarchies, insecurities, and hidden resentments waiting for the correct pressure. Picture yourself observing two factions competing for status. A lesser strategist chooses a side. A wiser one strengthens both just enough to keep them wary of each other. You offer vague support. Praise one group's discipline while admiring the other's creativity, and let them wonder where your loyalty lies. Their desire to secure your favor becomes the spark that ignites rivalry. Their conflict distracts them while you advance untouched. Influence gained without exposure is the most durable kind. This method relies on understanding motivations deeper than your adversaries do. Every group is held together by a myth: loyalty, shared purpose, or fear of isolation. When you learn the myth that binds them, you also learn how to unravel it. Suppose a workplace clique prides itself on fairness. A single suggestion that one member receives special privileges fractures the unity. You need not state it boldly. A subtle question, an innocent remark, or a compliment directed at the right person can shift the entire balance. The most effective manipulators do not create conflict, they reveal it. They expose the quiet tensions others pretend do not exist. When you highlight a contrast between leadership and followers, between talent and recognition, between effort and reward, you awaken dormant grievances. The group begins to tear itself apart, believing the rupture originated within, never suspecting the hand that nudged it. Influence from the outside grants you something those inside never possess: freedom from allegiance. Because you are not bound to their identity, you can act with clarity while they drown in emotional investment. You see their ambitions with cold precision, and your detachment becomes an advantage they can neither detect nor counter. When they argue, you listen. When they scheme, you observe. When they ask for support, you provide only enough to deepen their dependency. Remember, this power grows not from dominating others, but from directing their movements without revealing your intent. When two rivals compete for your approval, they inadvertently grant you authority over both. They adjust their behavior for your benefit. They consult you before acting. They fear losing your favor more than losing the conflict itself. You become the silent judge around which their strategies orbit. But you must never reveal that you orchestrate the tension. Stay distant, neutral, and aloof. Let them interpret your silence as wisdom, your hesitation as discernment, your few words as prophecy. People assign meaning to the figure who never rushes to intervene. Through restraint, you cultivate mystique. Through mystique, you cultivate power. Soon, the factions exhaust themselves. Their leaders grow wary, their followers disillusioned. And when both sides search for stability, you step forward with authority. You offer guidance, structure, and resolution. They accept because you remained untouched by their conflict, rising above it like a fixed star while they circled chaotically below. Yet mastering the silent war for influence is not the final step. There is a deeper technique, one that transforms independence into a weapon others can sense, but never fully understand. To wield it, you must learn the art of signaling strength without uttering a word, creating a presence that bends the will of others before you even speak. Self-sufficiency is more than the ability to stand alone. It is the silent declaration that you owe nothing to anyone, and therefore cannot be controlled. When others look at you and see a person who depends on no ally, no patron, and no collective shield, they experience a subtle, instinctive hesitation. They realize they cannot threaten what they cannot take away. Ask yourself, what leverage can someone hold over you if everything essential already belongs to you? Throughout history, rulers who mastered self-sufficiency commanded respect without demanding it. Consider the solitary leaders who emerged during times of instability. They possessed few allies, yet held immense influence, because their strength did not require external validation. A figure who does not beg for support appears dangerous to those who rely on constant reinforcement. The more independent you become, the more others sense a presence they cannot easily define. Think of the individual who enters a room without seeking acknowledgement. His confidence radiates not through words, but through an absence of need. Others, uncertain why he stands so firmly, begin to project authority onto him. They whisper, wonder, and watch. You have witnessed this phenomenon. People elevate those who appear unaffected by social currents. Dependence makes you predictable, self-sufficiency makes you enigmatic. Psychologically, humans gravitate towards strength, especially the strength that asks for nothing. When someone remains calm under pressure, when they refuse to panic, when they do not rush to justify themselves, observers assume hidden resources. They imagine power where there may be only discipline. This is the great paradox of self-sufficiency. The less you display, the more others attribute to you. But to wield this power, you must construct it deliberately. Self-sufficiency begins with internal clarity. You must know what you value, what you pursue, and what you can sacrifice. The solitary strategist carries no unnecessary burdens. He does not take on obligations that cloud judgment or create emotional debt. Every bond must serve a purpose, and every purpose must align with his direction. Consider how factions manipulate the dependent. They offer support, praise, or security, and in return demand obedience. But you, if you are self-sufficient, cannot be drafted into their schemes. Their rewards do not tempt you because your foundation does not rely on their approval. Their threats do not frighten you because your stability is internal. This freedom unsettles them. They cannot move you the way they move others. Observe how people react when you decline favors. They grow curious, sometimes suspicious, because most individuals depend so heavily on social exchange that refusal appears unnatural. Yet it is precisely this refusal that shapes your image. You send a subtle message, I am complete without your involvement. And once they believe that, even slightly, you gain psychological ground. Self-sufficiency also influences hierarchy. Those who depend on groups defer to those who do not. They look to them during uncertainty, seeking guidance from someone who seems anchored while they drift. If you maintain composure when others collapse into panic, you become their unspoken pillar. Influence emerges naturally, without effort or demand. But understand this truth: self-sufficiency is not isolation. It is the ability to engage without becoming owned. You may join alliances, but only temporarily. You may accept support, but never rely on it. You become a participant, not a servant, a collaborator, not a subordinate. This selective involvement increases your value. People want the allegiance of someone who does not need them. Over time, your independence becomes a signal. It tells others you are not easily manipulated, not swiftly convinced, not driven by fear of abandonment. They treat you with caution, even deference, because they sense you stand on ground they cannot shake. Yet there is a deeper mastery beyond mere self-sufficiency. Once you learn to remain untouched by dependence, you must learn to use that freedom as a weapon. One that shapes alliances, influences outcomes, and turns your independence into a silent force that bends others toward your will. And in the next principle, you will discover how to project this inner autonomy outward, creating an aura so commanding that even your quietest gestures influence decisions, shift loyalties, and recalibrate the ambitions of those who stand before you now. A ruler who steps forward without first mastering silence is a ruler already trapped. This is the truth most ignore, because noise feels like progress, and stillness feels like weakness. But you know better. You've tasted enough of the world to understand that every decisive move begins as a quiet intention, hidden beneath layers of thought, caution, and deliberate restraint. Look at the great players of history. The ones who acted first rarely survived longest. It was those who waited. Those who observed, listened, and held their fire, who shaped nations. Consider the Venetian diplomats, who built an empire not through armies, but through the art of controlled revelation. They shared nothing until the moment sharing served them. And by then, every other faction was already dancing to their rhythm. Ask yourself when you speak, do you strengthen your position, or do you feed your enemies? When you share your plans, do you gain allies, or do you give competitors the blueprint to undermine you? Most people talk because silence makes them uncomfortable. But silence is a weapon, one that cuts deeper than any sharpened blade. There is a psychological truth at work here. Humans cannot tolerate an information vacuum. When you reveal little, they fill in the gaps with their own fears, hopes, and insecurities. They project strength onto you even when you are simply being patient. This is why restraint is so powerful. It forces others to tell on themselves while you remain unreadable. Imagine a workplace rivalry. Two people want the same promotion. One tries to impress by broadcasting ambitions, seeking validation, gathering applause before earning victory. The other stays quiet. They watch. They let the loud rival expose his strategies, his alliances, his anxieties. And when the moment is right, they act. Precise, clean, and unchallenged. Who walks away victorious? Not the one who talked the most. Self-restraint is not passivity, it is positioning. It is the discipline of knowing when your move will land with maximum impact. Every general knows this. A premature attack wastes soldiers, breaks morale, and emboldens the enemy. But a strike launched from silence. That is how empires are seized overnight. You may feel the urge to announce your journey, to prove your worth, to declare your strength before it is fully formed. But think of Rome's most cunning commanders. They prepared unseen, marched silently, and revealed their true force only when the field was already theirs. Your life, though smaller in scale, operates by the same laws. Restraint guards your intentions. Restraint protects your evolving identity. Restraint ensures that when people finally witness who you've become, it's too late for them to intervene. And remember this, the world respects what it cannot predict. Mystery creates gravity. Have you ever noticed how the quiet one in the room becomes the center of attention, even without trying? Their silence invites speculation. Speculation creates intrigue, and intrigue gives them power over the narrative without speaking a single word. But silence alone is not enough. It must be paired with inner clarity. You must know what you seek, what you refuse, and what you will patiently wait for. Even the most silent strategist is powerless if they lack direction. So, let your restraint become your forge. Each unspoken thought hardens into intention. Each intention refines into strategy. Each strategy, held long enough, becomes an inevitability waiting to be deployed. And when you finally act, your action will carry the weight of every moment you chose not to act. This is why those who cultivate self-restraint wield a colder, deeper form of influence, one that does not need approval, applause, or recognition. Yet understand this: every advance you make in the shadows sharpens your outline in the light. People begin to sense the quiet force behind your actions, the calculated patience, the refusal to be rushed by anyone's urgency but your own. And once they sense it, they adjust. Some retreat, some cling, and some finally reveal their true intentions. But the final reward of restraint is something rarer than power. It is the unshakable confidence that comes from knowing you cannot be rushed, provoked, manipulated, or coerced. And that journey, your journey, is only beginning. In the end, control is never about force. It is about direction. You guide people the same way a river bends a ship, quietly, invisibly, without ever announcing your hand. You let them believe the movement was their idea, their desire, their will. That is the highest form of power. Because once their mind carries your influence without resistance, you no longer need to push. They move on their own, and you merely watch. So ask yourself, how many decisions in your life were truly yours? And how many belonged to someone who understood this game long before you did? If you felt a shiver in that question, good. It means you're beginning to see the architecture of human behavior, the levers, the illusions, the strings behind the curtain. Now the next move is yours. Leave a comment with the insight that struck you the hardest. Subscribe if you want more strategies delivered with the precision of a blade. And share this video with someone who thinks they cannot be influenced. Let them discover how wrong they are.